Listen to that German refinement. Oof. Like a bank vault. So I'm back again already with the old podcast. I was going to make a video today, but bit of a curveball thrown in there. But thanks to everyone who, again, with the handful of people who've listened to the first episode, and plenty of nice things. People are saying lots of nice things, and that's nice. I like when people are nice. It's fun when they're bastards too sometimes, because then it gives you the opportunity to be a bastard too. There you go. Yeah, I was going to make a video about my new car, and if you did listen to the first episode of my podcast, you would know that my new car is a Mark I Ford Focus. But admittedly, a couple of days after I got that Focus, there was a strange grinding noise from the rear drum brakes, which I did try and investigate myself. But when I went to take off the rear wheels, they were beyond seized. I tried hammers, I tried taking the nuts off and driving it around to see if the weight of the car would make a budge, but to no avail. So I torqued the nuts back on and just turned up the stereo and pretended like nothing was happening. But then I went out for a spirited drive with a fellow motoring enthusiast, shout out to Ian, in his Mini Cooper S. And for the first little bit, I was head of the pack and everything was going fine. Then we switched over, and the first heavy braking opportunity we came to, a tight right-hander, my brake pedal went all the way to the floor, and thankfully I didn't go into the back of Ian, and I do promise, if you're listening, Ian, I would have put it in the ditch rather than putting it into the back of your Mini. Yes, that was frightening. So first I was like, did I boil the brake fluid? No, so unlikely, not impossible. Checked the reservoir. It wasn't max, but there was brake fluid in the reservoir, which I had to turn off the engine obviously because it's a Ford Focus. I had to turn off the engine to use the ignition key to open the bonnet, which, yeah, I never understood that. Anyway, I won't get off topic. So we continued on. We said we'll see how I get on. I kept my distance from Ian this time a little bit, so I didn't have to make that decision of ditch or back of Mini. It would still bite at the very, very end of the travel of the pedal, enough that, like, if I needed it to stop, but I wasn't making any late braking or emergency stops, put it that way. So we stopped at a petrol station and had another look, and the reservoir was completely empty of brake fluid. So that wasn't great. So there must have been a leak somewhere, which we couldn't see. Continued on. No, sorry, I picked up a jug of the final jug they had as well of brake fluid from the petrol station we were at, and I filled it up. And we went on for another little bit, and then I stopped anyway for a coffee and a relief of my bladder. And when I was walking back to my car, I realised there was a nice, like, uniform, almost like a sunburst of brake fluid on the rear driver's side wheel. So it appears somewhere the brake fluid is leaking into the rear drum and then shooting out as the wheel spins. And yeah, if we looked at the back of the wheel, it was also covered in brake fluid. Anyway, so I'm going. Long story short, I have the Focus less than 2 weeks, and they gave me a 30-day warranty with it. So I drove it straight from this little adventure back to the dealership, and admittedly they were very understanding about it. They saw it, they took it for a quick drive and immediately gave me a Mark V Golf as a courtesy car while they have a look at it. They did say to have a look at it today. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't heard anything from them yet, but I'm in no rush because they gave me a Mark V Golf, which is slightly younger in years, not on the odometer, than my Focus, but it's a 1.6 FSI fuel stratified injection. Admittedly, when I first got in it, I picked it up from the dealership and drove it back to my house, and then I went out in a boot with my day. But if you'd blindfolded me before I opened the bonnet when I got back to my house, I would have assumed it was a diesel. Yeah, I've never driven a fuel stratified injection engine before. It's gruff, to say the least. I was considering making a video on the Golf, but I got bored myself just thinking about it, because it's a silver 3-door Golf, Mark V Golf. It's got 200 and something thousand kilometers on it, and it was averaging 3.4 litres per 100 kilometers on them, which is what I think about 30 mpg in all money, give or take, which is fine. Yeah, the engine's gruff, especially at idle. I think it's got 115 brake and the same many foot-pounds of torque. It doesn't feel terribly slow. It's very low geared in first and second. Almost, get yourself a bit of whiplash pulling away from lights. And then on the motorway, it'll hold its own. I think peak power is at 6,000 RPM, but I didn't go anywhere near that level of the tachometer because one, it's not my car, and two, that gruff engine, it's not appealing to rev it out. But I think torque comes in reasonably lower than that, and it'll hold its own. Even like it's a 6-speed. If you're in 6 doing 120 kilometers an hour, it's sitting at about 3,000 RPM, and if you put the foot in, you'll be able to make an overtake for sure. The cabin is very nice. All the materials are great. It definitely has an upgraded stereo. It's a VAG OEM head unit, but it's definitely more salubrious than one that would have been available in 2006. The high speed, but the motorway speed ride is a bit questionable. It's a bit jiggly. Yeah, I would expect better. It's not particularly entertaining to drive. I've only done about 25 kilometers in it, but grip, endless amounts of grip, but it's not exactly playful. It's okay speed-wise, as I say. The driving position's great. You can get the seat base really low, and the steering wheel is adjustable for rake and reach, which is nice. And as I said, all the touch points in the cabin are lovely. And even when you're sitting at a set of lights, and when it's just sitting at idle, it is incredibly refined. You'd almost question whether the engine is on. But yeah, it's fine. If they don't get my focus back to me before the weekend, maybe I'll make a video about it. It's strange though, it's because I've driven a Mark V Golf GTI, and its legendary status, which is clearly well earned and solidified. But I can't see. It's strange. It doesn't feel like there's any connection between this car and the Mark V Golf GTI. I know there's quite a few mechanical alterations to the Golf, but even stuff like that Mark 1 Focus is a perfect example. And even a Phase 2 Mini I had, or not Mini, what I'm talking about, I've never owned a Mini, which I have, I might do at some point, but my Phase 2 Clio, just 1.2 8-valve Clio. Those two cars, you could tell from the chassis, the baseline chassis, you could see how it wouldn't take a hell of a lot more to make a good quick version, which they have done, whereas the Golf, you have to give credit to the engineers in Germany working for Volkswagen who managed to take the regular Mark V and turn it into the GTI that it is. It almost raises my level of respect for the Mark V Golf GTI. And I'm going to stop talking about this now because it's, geez, if you're still listening at this point, I've just talked about an old Focus and a relatively old Golf. Where's my notes? Just stick to my notes. I wonder what this actually sounds like as well, because I'm not on a hike this time, but I am out walking. Thought the hike wasn't great because it's an uphill. There's some energy expenditure. I'm going to go to the sideline just in case come off the beaten track a bit, because maybe that traffic noise is completely skewing. Maybe you can't even hear me, and therefore I'm going to have to scrap this. But this lane here, it's much quieter. I'm in suburbia. I tried to team it this time with an now jaunt to the shops. I'm going to make a bolognese later, and there's a nice health food shop I'm going to go to get a different array of mushrooms, because I love mushrooms, and if you don't like mushrooms, well, maybe we can't be friends. I was talking about my Golf, my Focus. So obviously the biggest news in the last 24 hours, journos have been given this laneway doesn't go anywhere. Nice off-street garages though for these houses. I'm not going to say exactly where I am because that would be cruel. But I'm in one of the more affluent areas of Dublin. Yeah, they have some nice off-street garages at the back of their houses. I wonder if there's something tasty in there. Anywho, the 911 GT3, the new one. So all the journals have got it. Probably a caveat to this. It's obviously media embargoes, which I get. I understand why they have to do them because the car is as important as the GT3 RS. It'd be unfair for someone to get it before the rest. And also, but it just meant we had a glut of reviews all at once. I watched several of the videos and I read a couple of the reports. And unsurprisingly, the consensus is good. And everyone seems to pretty much agree on every aspect of the car. Yeah, it's a 911 GT3 spun off a platform, a 992 platform that everyone already says is a great piece of engineering. So unsurprisingly, the GT3 is incredible from what it sounds like. 500 horsepower from a 4-litre flat six, which they say is the exact same engine from the Cup car. Andrew Frankel. It was great to see Andrew Frankel back. Andrew Frankel did the video and the written report for Autocar. Those of you Gen Zers might only know Andrew Frankel as the co-owner of the intercooler, formerly known as ReinCarNation, with Dan Prosser. But yeah, he did the video review, and he was. What did I bring up Andrew Frankel? What did he say about it? For fuck's sake, remember like a goldfish. Something he referred to that I was going to mention. Anyway, I'll get back to that if it comes back to me. But yeah, he did it for Autocar. Henry Catchpole did it for Carfection. Harris did it for Top Gear. And what other one did I watch? Oh, and Dan Prosser did it for Pistonheads. Yeah, they all agreed, same thing. It's incredible. And why wouldn't it be? They all use the same car. It's that new blue I think they brought for this generation, which kind of looks like Miami blue. But I'm sure it has a different name. It's a right-hand drive car, DSG. Apparently the manual is available. I wonder, I'd love to see how many they're going to sell. Yeah, and they also they all had it on road and the track. The Harris video was very good, and we have to take Harris's word, as we do. I've grown up with Chris Harris. I remember him from his Autocar days, so I have a lot of respect for him. But obviously, the bigger you get in this game, the more contentious you can become. But anyway, Harris is still, he's still a great journalist, and I respect everything he says. And we have to take his word about the GT3 very well, because the man's had many a Porsche and many a GT Porsche, and he currently has a 991 Touring. So if ever there's a man to have a good opinion on the new car, it's him. But anyway, he agreed with everyone else. It's fantastic. The biggest change for the GT3 is they've gone from a McPherson strut front suspension to double wishbones, which is pretty big, even if the lap time, I don't know if anyone's actually lapped it yet. Actually, no, I think it was like 7 seconds quicker around the Nürburgring. But anyway, big change. And also there's lots of air addenda underneath, little flicks and stuff, which, having watched Formula 1 for years, I will know that they are definitely there as vortex generators to seal the underside of the floor into the diffuser to increase rear downforce. But it appears to have, because apparently it seems to be pretty unstickable, although if you turn all the traction control off, all the engineers showed they can definitely make it go sideways. It's clearly a very aggressive car. The aero is aggressive. It's a much stiffer car. They're all saying it's very busy at back road pace, which just means it'd probably be an unusable car in Ireland, to be honest. But I suppose the introduction of the Touring in the 991 has allowed more scope for the normal GT3, normal quote unquote, to kind of become more aggressive. Obviously the Touring is going to be the one to have less wing, as subtle as you can make a car like that look, and it will probably be more road focused now with the GT3 going slightly more track focused. I suppose the biggest question really is this. Also, actually, before saying the swan neck rear wing, I think looks great. Having watched sports car racing for the last couple of decades, I understand why it's a swan neck rear wing, and I think it looks great. I never thought that was going to be a problem. But the rear end of the car generally, and this is a problem I think across the board with the 992. It's a bit, it's hard. If you look at it dead on the GT3, it's fine. Then if you see it from the side, so because it's a top-mounted rear wing, the rear wing mounts are actually quite far in the car, into the centre of the car. And then there's the ducktail spoiler underneath, and then like there's the sunken light bar, and then the bumper sticks out again. It's an odd look. It's fussy, to say the least. But yeah, I suppose the biggest takeaway from all these GT3 reviews and how aggressive it's become, definitely more track focused car. What will the RS be? Like that would surely that would be at this point, while it was always an aggressive car. Surely the next one, this 992 GT3 RS is going to be unusable. So this being an aural adventure, this podcasting game. If I do see anything interesting, I will try and share it. So I'll try and take the pictures, and I will then put them on my Instagram at ReinCarNation on Instagram. I'll post them up there, and I'll put them as a little highlight reel as well, labelled podcast or something like that. So if I do see anything, you'll be able to see what I saw there. Speaking of my username, again, ReinCarNation, I was quite proud of that one. I wanted to get something with the word car in it. And surprisingly, ReinCarNation without the underscores was taken. I haven't actually looked up that account, but I assume it's not about cars. ReinCarnation is Buddhism, isn't it? Is it Buddhism? Do Buddhists believe? I assume you have to come back as a living entity. I assume you can't be reincarnated as a car. I wouldn't mind being reincarnated as a car. I think that'd be okay. It'd be better than come back and say like a blobfish or one of those hairless cats that looks like a ball bag. I'm getting off topic. One of my friends actually messaged me the other day going, he only realised the reincarnation thing. And he said he's always been reading it as ReinCarNation. Which is fair enough, yeah. Oh look, there's an alpha spider. Okay, here we go. So if you have listened to this podcast this far, and you're wondering what this alpha spider looks like, I'm going to take a photo of it now. And it will be up on my Instagram, and it'll be labeled podcast. So you'll know what it is, and then people are like, what podcast? And they should listen to my podcast, shouldn't they? There we go. What was I talking about? How did I get onto Instagram podcasts? Anyway, fuck it. I've talked about the new GT3. Actually, something I don't have written down on my notes here because it only actually happened when the news was only released as I was on my way to doing this. Ferrari have announced the extreme version of the 812. They just released some renders and some of the technical information. They don't even have a name for it yet. Obviously the F12 was the TDF, and before that we had the 599 GTO, and obviously the Berlinetta ones, the Speciale and the Scuderia, etc. Pista. Fucking diesel trucks. Really worried now you won't actually be able to hear a word I'm saying because of all this background noise. Maybe doing it out in nature was a better idea. Quite ironic. Well, there's a 992 911 Turbo S, I think. I'll take a picture of this as well. Again, we'll enjoy it as a team. I'll even do a video this time. What was I talking about? Yeah, I got distracted by a 911 Turbo. I was talking about the new Ferrari. So they don't have a name for it yet, but apparently the V12 now has 850 horsepower at 9,500 RPM from a naturally aspirated V12. I wonder, did Ferrari see what Gordon Murray's doing with his V12 and his T50? And I'm like, shit, we really gotta, V12s, that's our shit. And realised this could be the last naturally aspirated V12 Ferrari make. That's those numbers are mental. Way too much car for anybody. I'm not a huge lover of the way the 812 looks. I think it's a bit fussy. I think the F12 was a much better looking car. I'll take the 599. Bloody diesel trucks. Trucks need to go hydrogen powered soon. Yeah, I think the 599 is a beautiful car as well. But actually the sporty renders actually looks, I think the TDF isn't as good looking as the regular F12, but the sporting variant, going off the renders as I say, actually looks like it might be the better version of the A12 aesthetically. It's got like some sort of strange like, carbon thing across the bonnet that's also like a big aero scoop kind of thing, I think, and then the exhausts appear to be right out at each corner and they're like rectangular shaped. Yeah, look, a V12 Ferrari that revs out to 9,500 RPM, naturally aspirated. Well, that's just great. There's a Jag XKR going up the road there. You can just hear the V8 burbling. Oh, I'll have to share that with you. It's too far away. Yeah, that's about as much as I have on that Ferrari. They don't even have a name yet. I think the name's not going to come until next month. If I haven't decided what they want to call it yet, because I'm trying to think, is there anything significant? What could they call it? The A12 Superfast is a terrible name. I'm sure there's some sort of historic lineage. I should know that, but I don't care. That was something they made for the American market back in the 60s. Something I don't think I mentioned previously, because it actually came out last week. I think I did mention, because I tried to record my first episode a couple of weeks ago, and when I'd finished talking to myself, I then looked and realised the battery in my microphone had died. So yeah, that was a big whole waste of time. So I don't think I talked about this in my actual published episode I sent out, but I think I might have talked about it in the one that never got recorded. The Peugeot 508 by Peugeot Sport Engineering Sportback hybrid thing. Seeing as it was out over a week ago, I'm sure you're probably all aware of it. It's the Peugeot 508, but the sporty one. Peugeot have a good history of making sporty cars. They've had a few blips along the way, but 205 GTI, 309 GTI, the 206 GTI even is pretty decent. The 208 seems to be a pretty solid bet. There's a Vanquish. I will take a picture of that for you. Yeah, look, it's a hybrid. It's got the same kind of 1.6 turbo of all the other current sporty Peugeots, the 308 and the 208 GTI. But it's made into two electric motors. There's an electric motor on the front and rear axle. So all in the petrol engine produces 200 horsepower. Then one of the electric motors does 110, and the other one is 113. I'm not a mathematician, but that's what 423 horsepower all in, which is impressive. 384 pound-foot of torque, 5.2 to 60, limited to 155, and an 8-speed. I think it's an 8-speed automatic. I don't think it's a dual clutcher. I assume it's not. Yeah, and all the reviews, everyone would say like, yeah, it's quick-ish. Not the most dynamic thing in the world. Nice place to be. Yada yada yada. Probably not necessarily the most sporting Peugeot ever, but a very, very nice high-end car. Personally, I think I would just get a regular 508 because I think the standard version looks better than this Peugeot Sport engineered one, with its too much aero addenda and giant wheels and leery paint job, because it's got these yellow accents around the place, which is a bit, and they put the three claw marks on the front beside the model badge, so it off centers the model badge. And yeah, I think I just get a regular one, because this Sport engineered jobby is going to start, unfortunately I don't have the sterling price here, but £55,000. So that's a 70 grand car. minimum here. And like, you know, you're looking at what? It's got some strong competition there. Like, probably going to get yourself a 5 Series for that. E-Class. Those who don't give a shit about cars, you know, I assume you can get a Model 3 for that kind of money. Tesla. Yeah, it's a lot of money to be asking for a Peugeot. I'm glad it exists, but I'll be surprised if it's a sales success. One of the good things about it though is it's still wearing the old Peugeot badge. So it must have slipped through the net before the new incredibly shit Peugeot. There's a lad giving it way too much power in a Golf 4 in a built-up area, and he's heavy on the brakes coming up to find that van. What an absolute wanker. Could be stolen, of course. I love a fast car, but don't drive like a dickhead. Yeah, I hope, look, Peugeot make more sporting models. The 508's a great car across the board. The brand new S-Class, I'll take a photo of this as well for the gram, flexing for the gram. Yeah, but I think it's got some strong competition, and it's an expensive car. But yeah, I'm glad to make it. What else was I going to talk about in the car world? Obviously not a whole lot's happened since I last talked to you, because it was literally only a couple of days ago. But I suppose some good news, Aston Martin, because when they had their financial woes last year, and when Lance Stroll, that's his son, when Lawrence Stroll took a majority stake in the company, one of the first things he's like, they were going to focus on current models, put a pause on the EV thing with Lagonda, which was understandable because of the cost, but also stopping your electric program at a time like this was also a bit, you know, it's not a bit archaic thinking. But anyway, they've announced today that the Valhalla, which is going to be the next sports car, that's going to be a mid-engined, very focused sports car from Aston Martin. It kind of looks like a slightly kind of tamer version of the Vulcan. It's going to have a V6 hybrid, a bespoke. Well, it'll be bespoke initially, but it will be shared with other cars. Yeah, and I believe in-house built V6, hybrid V6, which would be interesting because it's going to go up against then this McLaren Artura, which is also going to be a hybrid V6. But it's good to see, they haven't completely run away from electricity yet, because they can't, otherwise the big company will fail. But the hybrid Valhalla will be the first, and it's going to be followed by full electric models after that, starting off with an electric DBX, which, yeah, I think that could be good for Aston Martin, because it's going to be Mercedes EV tech, which you have to assume is pretty decent stuff to get off the shelf. Yeah, and like the DBX seems to be a pretty decent sports SUV, which is a horrible thing to say out loud, but they seem to have at least got the job done pretty well. Fair play to Aston Martin. I'm glad to see that they are still thinking about the future, because I own a small amount of shares in Aston Martin, so all the best to them. Yeah, so I just want to talk about car ownership in Ireland. The reason this has sparked my mind is a good friend of mine has a B7 Audi RS4 Avant. Fantastic car. It's one of those cars that it exceeded expectations when I first saw it and drove it, because my friend is kind enough to let me to drive it occasionally. It's brilliant, and it's a car we'll never see again. You know, a 4.2 litre V8, naturally aspirated V8, 6-speed manual, all-wheel drive estate car that looks mean as hell with its wide tracks and big swollen arches. It was a dream car for my friend who owns it, and he loves it. It's a fantastic car. As I say, there's no denying it. But he hasn't really gelled with it. He can quite comfortably afford to own and run it. But also, one, it's way more car than anybody needs in Ireland, and even he will admit that, because like you're way above the speed limit in third gear, and it's just too big as well for Ireland. It's not even a particularly big car. Something I've said before is that like all you really need in Ireland, because the roads that you can enjoy driving on are small back roads in Ireland, which may not have been well maintained over the years. So you want something with a relatively pliant chassis with a soft spring rate, but good body control, and in and around 150 to 250 brake horsepower per tonne. That's all you need. So there are two ends to the spectrum. So obviously my friend, buying an Audi RS4 was one of the more elaborate purchases you can make. And then you have someone like me who buys cars for less than £1,000. Yes, okay, they're never going to be the in your face. They're probably not going to spark the emotions and feelings that you get from something as exotic as a V8 or S product from Audi, or a sports car, or anything that costs at least four figures. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, and obviously they're not going to be concourse cars. You might have to maintain them. Stuff might break, and they're probably going to need upkeep rather than anything breaking on them. Just stuff that needs updating and refreshing. But also at the same time, if something catastrophic does go wrong, it was a cheap car. You don't have to worry about it, but it might be the most dependable thing in the world. But that's the same thing with my friend's car. Is the RS. It's got very bespoke components, and it has the DRC suspension, which is a common fault where they start weeping and then they fail. That's why people swap out and put coilovers on them. Because it's not will it fail, it's when will it fail. And admittedly his is holding up pretty well, but it's always in the back of his mind, is this going to happen? Will that happen? Is it going to get stolen? So I think, yes, there is a middle point. You probably should spend more than three-figure sums on cars if you want something dependable and in a slightly more presentable condition. But then also spending loads of money on something that is going to be expensive to own, expensive to run, and that you're going to worry about. So there probably is a middle point. So yeah, spend at least four figures on a car, but don't go mental, because there's only so much car you can use on the Irish roads. Yeah, don't go mad. Basically what I'm trying to say is a really, really long way of saying, just get a nice hot hatch. One with 200 to 250 brake horsepower. You don't need anything more than that. And then just a little side note, I watched the first episode of the new season of Reeling in the Years, which I admit was kind of a bit depressing, because it shot me back to my early 20s. Especially the music really kind of takes you back. It's too soon though. I think it's too new. It's all too fresh 10 years ago to be making it a series of Reeling in the Years. But still, anyway, I watched the first episode. One thing I know is now, it was a sad part of the episode. It was about the passing of Jerry Ryan. But there was an interview with Dave Fanning, and I couldn't help but see over his shoulder, parked nose to nose, an E39 5 Series and a W124 Mercedes. I think I have a screenshot of it. I'll post that up on the gram as well. So like last time, I'm gonna finish up with some Formula 1 bollocks. It's just going back to that last race and that incident between George Russell and Valtteri Bottas, which was ruled as a racing incident, which, yeah, it was, to be fair. But it was George Russell's reaction which I think kind of sparked the biggest talking point. He was quite vocal at the time. He ran over to Valtteri and gave him a piece of his mind, which is, that's understandable, heat of the moment. But then, yeah, he doubled down in the media, saying Valtteri was crazy, and that this is like a gentleman's agreement, don't do this thing. But Valtteri didn't do anything out of the wrong when you look back at all the replays. Yeah, and that went on for a couple of hours, and then eventually George Russell released a statement essentially apologising for his conduct and yada 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 and blah 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 blah, which you'd have to assume he was told to do, because not only is George Russell a Mercedes junior driver, having filled in for Lewis Hamilton last year when Lewis Hamilton had the Rona at the Sakir Grand Prix, the one that Perez won, and he is, we all believe, the next person in line for a Mercedes drive, be it if Hamilton retires or if they feel Bottas isn't up to scratch. And also, Toto Wolff manages George Russell. He's his manager. And Toto Wolff, he didn't, he's the king of PR, but he did jokingly say, I think George, I shouldn't do his accent, I think George should, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'd better off racing in the Clio Cup in Formula 1 right now. he said it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but you have to think a small part of him was actually serious. Not really, but people were saying a certain Harris Chris was like, I do hope it doesn't have ramifications for George Russell's future. He said like that would be unfair and unjust, which, yeah, okay, there's an element of, but again, look, as I said, I appreciate Sir Harris, and he's a great journalist and everything, but he certainly does like to fly the flag for United Kingdom land. So when he does back the British drivers. Yeah, but I kind of see where he was coming from in that sense. But also, we have to think back to 2014 to 2016, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, and how tense that got. And Toto's been very vocal over the years as how that gave him a few grey hairs and how he never wants that again. And it's why they've kept Valtteri Bottas for so long, because he's a calming influence in the team, and he's playing the number 2, even if he wants to or not, very well, and everything's peace and calm. And yeah, Toto won't stand for that kind of conflict and tension in a team ever again. It's no secret, and George should know that. He definitely knows that better than anyone. So his reaction with the person who he's aiming to either replace or be teammates with, depending on how things go, his reaction definitely wouldn't have pleased Toto Wolff. And Toto Wolff is a stakeholder in Mercedes. He's the team boss. He's George Russell's manager. So you even have to look like, yes, I assume Nico Rosberg wanted to retire because he wanted to spend time with his children and he'd achieved his goal. But you'd be foolish to think that Toto Wolff certainly didn't, bend Nico's ear and give him the advice that Toto wanted him to hear too. But yeah, so I agree. I hope it doesn't have a negative impact on George's future, because he is a great racing driver. But he has to think about the long game. And he knows the people he needs to look good in front of. It's something he's very good at. It's how he got his job at Williams with his infamous PowerPoint presentation. He knows how to conduct himself in front of the right people. He has to remember that in the heat of the moment. So there we go. I'm gonna finish up there now on that. Or will I give you some? What recommendations will I give you this time? In podcast terms, probably a good one to listen to. If you want to learn about some Formula One history, if you've made it this far in the podcast, maybe you are interested in Formula One. The Race, which is a what would you call it? A motorsport multimedia conglomerate. Loads of former contributors for Autosport, and people who used to work in the Formula One circus, and anyway, they do some good stuff. But they have a podcast called Bring Back V10s, and it focuses on the stories in the V10 era of Formula One, and there's some really good stuff, some really good insights, some really good stories. So that's a good one. If you're into Formula One, I highly recommend that. And there's a big, I think they're on their 3rd season, so there's a big back catalogue to go through. It's a good one to go to if you're looking for a podcast. You don't have a podcast to listen to, which I know is rare because it's a saturated market, and I'm now recording podcasts and putting them out into the world too. And then YouTube channel recommendation. I told you about M539 last time, which if you're a BMW nerd, I highly recommend. But this time around, who would I recommend this time? I'm pulling a blank pretty badly here. I'm going to go with Radarosa. You might know Radarosa because he featured on a Smoking Tire episode a couple of years ago. Radarosa, I don't know his 100% knows backstory, but he knows a hell of a lot about Ferraris, so I'm assuming he used to be a Ferrari technician at some point. But anyway, he's called Radarosa because he bought a half-finished Testarossa project that someone was going to convert into a convertible Testarossa, because there was one made, I think it was for Gianni Agnelli. There was one convertible Testarossa made. It's in some sort of Grigio colour. So someone tried to make their own one out of a Testarossa coupe. Didn't finish it.
So Radarosa bought it and he put it back on the road, but he bought it like stripped of paint and stuff. So he's got it mechanically running and roadworthy, but he left it unpainted and ratty around the edges, so hence Radarosa. He has several other projects that he's done and on the go. His most recent one is he managed to convince someone to sell a 512 BBI that was turning to dust on their driveway, and he's currently restoring that. So yeah, get on that if you like Ferraris. He knows his shit, and it's he managed to pull off some good shit. I'm gonna wrap up now. Again, I'm not 100% pleased how this went. I have things to work out. But I said, like, you know, if you are enjoying it and you are listening, do let me know what you think. And I'm gonna keep doing them anyway, because why the hell wouldn't I? So stay safe, stay well, and I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye.